From the heartland of America and the gateway to the West, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie. This is Coast to Coast AM. Later tonight, creatures. Here's what's happening. Well, that great actor Jeremy Renner, who played Hawkeye in the Marvel Avengers movies and others, in critical but stable condition in a hospital in Nevada, a day after suffering a traumatic snow plowing injury. He's undergone chest surgery. He's out of surgery now. Tragic story. Moscow has admitted heavy casualties suffered in Ukrainian strike on a Russian-occupied region in one of the deadliest attacks on the Kremlin's forces since the war began over 10 months ago. Russia's defense ministry said that Ukrainian forces fired rockets at a facility in the eastern region where Russian soldiers were stationed, killing 63 of them in one attack. TikTok is an addictive drug China's government is providing to Americans, says the incoming chairman of the new House Select Committee on China. I thought it'd be time to bring in Lauren Weinstein to ask him, what's so dangerous about TikTok anyway, Lauren?
Delve into TikTok, I do want to wish you and the entire Coast team and all the listeners a Happy New Year, and here's hoping that 2023 will be a good one.
Well, thank you, Lauren.
All right, TikTok. There's at least two categories of issues surrounding TikTok. One is these claims that the content is addictive and harmful, especially to children. And this, of course, brings up issues we've discussed in the past in terms of different kinds of websites and entertainment in general. But since we do have a First Amendment in this country, I'm not currently convinced that the government is rightfully in a position to enforce broad bans along these lines. Now, some people say, well, just force these sites to prove they're not dealing with children. But when you think about it, to do that ultimately means that everyone using the web will have to provide likely government-issued identification to prove that they're not children. And frankly, I suspect that most adults would not be pleased with the prospect of having that kind of information be required for potentially every website they visit where concerns of children not having access could be an issue. There's different ways you could technically do it, but it's a privacy quagmire, no matter in any case. Now, the other category of complaints about TikTok now that are driving a lot of this are causing various government entities to ban its use on government phones, and some politicians to claim they want to try ban it entirely because of its connections to China. And yeah, there have been some cases involving Chinese personnel having inappropriate access to U.S. TikTok user data. ByteDance, which operates TikTok and is a Chinese firm, has claimed that they've made changes to prevent this and prevent other potential abuse of U.S. data. But really, when you look at it, most of these kinds of offenses that they've been accused of are pretty much of the same kind as we've seen with some apps that have nothing to do with China. And there is a feeling among many observers that politicians of both parties have to some extent been pushing this ban TikTok argument, at least partly for political purposes. Because at this stage of the game, with so much controversy about ByteDance and TikTok, it would seem like ByteDance would want to make sure that they don't lose the U.S. market entirely and would really want to toe the line. And after this kind of controversy also, TikTok probably would not be particularly useful as a spying tool given all the attention on these issues. So while it's true that there are legitimate controversies involving TikTok, I think it would be very wise to take much of the criticism we're hearing from both parties with more than a few grains of salt, but obviously we should keep our eyes on the situation.
All right, Lauren, thank you. Great information. And, I've always wondered about TikTok. You may know that being adequately hydrated is important for day-to-day bodily functions, such as regulating temperature and maintaining skin health. But drinking enough water is also associated with a significantly lower risk of developing chronic diseases, a lower risk of dying early, or lower risk of being biologically older than your chronological age, according to the National Institutes of Health. Bottom line, drink water, folks. Here's Dr. Sky Stephen Cates with his incredible weekly report of what's going on up there. Hello, Stephen. Happy New Year to you.
And Happy New Year, George, to you and the listeners. But here we go. As we look back to the New Year's Eve celebration, what's the backstory of the time ball, let's say of Times Square, New York, and others around the world from astronomy? Here's an interesting story. The history of the time ball goes back to 1818 when Royal Navy officer Robert Wauchope helped to develop a method of signaling from an astronomical observatory to ships so that chronometers could be set for ships to help calculate longitude. A time ball was simply dropped at an exact time, George, each day to set clocks by. And that tradition was introduced to the U.S. Naval Observatory in Washington, D.C. in 1845. Wauchope died back in 1862, and by then, time balls were in all inhabited continents around the world, but now replaced by modern radio time signals and atomic clocks today. The Times Square time ball was introduced back in 1907. But that leads us, George, to more information on time and our clocks as the Earth's rotation has been slowing down and now, according to many, speeding up, and both do not have specific causes. But a leap second had been added to the clock 27 times since 1972, last done in 2016, and will be abandoned in 2035. And now that the Earth's rotation is speeding up, we may soon have to add something called a negative leap second to our clocks. So keeping accurate time is not that easy. But going on to space, George, major moon missions in 2023. This could be the year of the lunar lander and rovers. NASA, European Space Agency, Japan, private enterprise, and some other space missions, just to list a few. Astrobionics Peregrine 1 lander, scheduled sometime in 2023 or 2024. NASA's Viper rover, searching and drilling for ice on the moon. We go back to SpaceX with Starship's first orbital mission. That'll happen, of course, in 2023 as planned. Japan has a slim lander, as they call it, going to the surface of the moon. How about this? Another NASA project called Prime 1, a rover on the moon. Russia gets into the act with the Luna 25 lander. And then NASA has an interesting space mission to the asteroid Psyche, a metal asteroid, we think. That asteroid mission in October of this year. The European Space Agency's Jupiter-Europa mission called JUICE, and ending it off with OSIRIS-REx, which is a spacecraft returning asteroid samples by September the 24th of 2023. We wrap it up, George, with the live sky, January skies as we know. And the Earth is closest to the sun on January 4th at 11:17 a.m. Eastern Standard Time at this incredibly close distance, 91,403,034 miles. A meteor shower known as the Quadrantids peaks on the morning hours of the 4th, high in the northeast sky just before sunrise, but a bright moon will affect the meteor numbers. The full Wolf moon on January the 6th. And how about this, George? A super conjunction of Saturn and the planet Venus on the morning, or should we say the evening hours, to correct myself, on January the 22nd in the southwest after sunset. More information always at theskylive.com. Emails, we love them, drskyshow@gmail.com. And we always say this, and we mean it even in 2023. Always remember to keep your eyes to the skies. I'm your navigator on the highway to the heavens. And, George, congratulations on your 20th anniversary, that is, of hosting this incredible show, and looking to be with you and the great listeners around the nation as we go to Sedona, right, in March, and Oregon in May, and to be part of that great stage show. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, too, Dr. Sky. Looking forward to seeing you. Tom will be telling you about the Sedona event later on tonight. And, of course, in a few breaks, I'll be telling you about our 20th anniversary party that we want you to celebrate with us tomorrow night. 2022 was supposedly going to be a year when America entered a new golden age of prosperity, but that didn't happen. Instead, it was a complete and utter disaster. Stock prices fell by the most that we have seen since 2008. The cryptocurrency industry came apart at the seams. Inflation soared to absurd heights, and home sales just kept declining all throughout the year. Without a doubt, 2022 represented a major turning point. Americans have already collectively lost trillions of dollars, and many experts are telling us that 2023 will be even worse. Well, will it? In a moment, Harry Dent Jr. joins us to tell us whether it will or not. Next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Harry Dent Jr. with us, received his MBA from the Harvard Business School, was a successful consultant to Fortune 100 companies at Bain & Company, and he realized there was much more research to be done in studying economic cycles and focused his time doing that, becoming known as the demographics guy. Harry uses the research he developed from decades of hands-on business experience and the cycles he analyzes and hones continuously to offer viewers you an easy-to-understand view of the economic future through his Dent Research publications. A couple of his books include 0 Hour, The Sale of a Lifetime, and The Demographic Cliff. Harry, welcome back, my friend. How are you?
Good. Nice to be back, George.
Looking forward to this, and are you looking forward to 2023?
Well, I am, because I think there's going to be big moves in the markets. Unfortunately, they're going to be to the downside. You know, I started forecasting way back in the 1980s using demographics, seeing what most people did not see back then coming off a difficult 1970s, that the baby boom generation, the largest generation in history, was going to grow up into the workforce and cause the greatest boom in history. Unfortunately, that they peaked, as I forecast, back in the mid-'80s, exactly in late 2007, when the last one of those baby boomers turned 46. That is when people spend the most money, the most important number in economics, which economists, unfortunately, don't have a clue about that happening. So ever since then, ever since 2007, we had the Great Recession. Well, what governments did, which they didn't do in the Great Depression and other times, they just opened the spigots and said, we're going to print unlimited amounts of money. Mario Draghi was the first one to say, I will print unlimited amounts of money to stop this recession. Everybody's been doing that since. So we had a recovery, but unlike the generational boom from 1983 to 2007 that was real and powerful and heavily technology-driven as well, this one has been all stimulus since early 2009 bottom. And now the stimulus went to the point where inflation all of a sudden surged and basically worked against the central banks and the Federal Reserve, and now they've had to tighten. Now, here's the thing, George. Everybody thinks, well, the economy's been strong so it can handle this. People don't understand that since early 2009, when they started printing money at $1 trillion a year and then up and up and up, and they printed $10 trillion ever since. It's all been stimulus. So just if they'd have just cut the stimulus off, we would have a slowing. But they have tightened. They've had to tighten to fight 9% plus inflation, which we have not seen since the early 1980s. So inflation finally caught up with central banks. People said, for a long time, well, they've been printing money. We haven't been getting inflation. Well, I have the best inflation indicator in the world. It's workforce growth. Young new people entering. That young people are expensive until they enter the workforce and start to become productive. Well, that basically, caused the high inflation in the 70s, but it also caused very low inflation into this era, which I predicted back decades ago, that we'd not only have the greatest boom in history, but inflation would fall to near zero. Well, then it went up to 9% with this stimulus, and that caused them to suddenly flip the switch and say, oh, we have to tighten. And now stocks, we've seen the first crash. And George, I've studied every major bubble in history and every major crash now. And the only way I know a bubble is ended, because, governments keep pumping them and people's confidence keep wanting to go on, is when you see a first crash of 30% or more, and we saw that. Okay, the NASDAQ
that's right.
34% in the first half of 2020. That's what told me, okay, we have finally topped. We gave our strongest sell signal to our newsletter subscribers ever, twice, in mid and late December, right before the peak on January 4th. So that peak, I'm telling people, is a long-term peak in stocks. We will not see that for a long time. 16,212 in the NASDAQ. I think it was 4,800 something on S&P. That's a peak we will not see again for a long time. And this crash, like major crashes in history, like late 72 into 75 and 1929 to 32, take 2.5 to 3 years to work out, which means we're not going to see a bottom to this until at least around mid-2024. So a lot of economists saying, okay, we've had our crash. Oh, yeah. But no, governments are tightening. They've had to tighten, and they're still having to tighten to catch up with overprinting and overstimulating. And this is going to last much longer. I'm also telling people, we saw that first crash. If you study crashes, major crashes through history, like 29 to 32, like 72 to 74, some of the biggest ones, There's 3 waves down. We saw the first one into June. We bounced into mid-August. We are in the next wave down, which usually is the strongest and most powerful. And if it breaks to a new low, I've got this magic number on the NASDAQ, 10,088. That was the last low. Once we break to a new low, it means this middle wave or the next wave down is in full force, and it's going to come fast and hard in the next few months. And this is when people are going to finally realize we're not in a correction. We're in a major downturn, and governments, with all their stimulus and stuff, now they're tightening, have lost control of the economy, and now we're going to crash is bigger than we did in 2008 to 9 in stocks, deeper downturn, not 11% unemployment, more like 15 to 16%, not a 55% stock crash, but more like 86% on the S&P, 92% on NASDAQ and my targets. This is serious, and I know this, George, but I've been predicting this for years, and government has been fighting this, and they're finally losing that battle. So the only thing we can do as investors and business people and consumers is to get out of the way of this crash. It's that simple. You get out of the markets, and we've had some bounces lately, even though we're way lower than we were, but there's a lot more to come. You just simply get out of the way, let this crash happen, and then buy somewhere, and I'm going to have better target on this at the time, but I would guess today, around the summer 2024, we're going to see the buy opportunity of a lifetime like we saw in late 1982 before the baby boom, when the millennial generation will be driving us up for many, many years. We will not see as strong a boom, as long a boom as the baby boom, but that's when we can buy stocks again and real estate and feel really good about it. Right now, especially real estate, which is hard to get out of and sell, I've been warning people, you better be out by now. In real estate for sure, and stocks, again, we gave our strongest sell signal ever in December of last year, and of course we've seen that big crash since. And this next wave, I think, is about to accelerate very soon. 10,088 on the NASDAQ. We break that number, and we're only 4% from that, George, right now.
Could happen any day.
Accelerate down.
People are afraid, Harry, of selling their stocks because they don't want to lose it.
No, again, and George, through most of history, and most financial advisors tell you, look, you can get you can lighten up when things get frothy, but it's better to stay in the markets and sit through correction. Not when you see something like this. Now, real quickly, let's review what's happened. We saw the first, what I call it, tech wreck, when we had the big bubble in 95 to 2000. That's what I call a natural bubble, George. The markets were so good, baby boomers in their sweet spot of spending, inflation down near that zero. I mean, everything was great. We had bubble number one, okay? Well, that crashed from 2000 to 2002, okay? That was a 57% crash in the S&P 500, the biggest one we've seen since the Great Depression, and 78% on the NASDAQ, the tech index, okay? We warned of that one, too. We were way ahead of that one, okay, because we saw the bubble. Okay, then we had the finale of baby boom spending into late 2007, something I predicted back in the mid-1980s when I first got my spending wave, my major demographic indicator, 46-year lag for the peak spending of the average person on the birth index adjusted for inflation. Okay, so we had that. We came back in 2007, less frothy boom, then crashed, and then they did this stimulus, this massive, no precedent for this ever time in history, 13 years of escalating stimulus. They thought it would only take one to bail us out in 2009, then the economy be back. No, we said no, the baby boom has peaked. The 2008-9 was a long-term peak demographically, and we don't turn into a long-term boom again until 2024. So we were warning this was not the end. So now we have, after all this massive stimulus, a final peak in November of the NASDAQ last year and January 4th this year in the S&P 500, and I'm saying that's a peak we will not see again until at least 2037 when millennials peak in spending, and this crash is going to go down as much as 86% on the S&P before it's over, 92% on the NASDAQ. Gold, which has held up the best as it did, before the 2007 crash. Gold went down finally, briefly, but a lot, 45, 50%. Gold has held up the best as commodities have already crashed if people in that arena. But gold will also go down when people see, no, there is no more an inflation threat. We're looking at deflation from all these financial assets going down in value and the economy slowing.
Hold on for a second, Harry. We're at the break. We'll come back and chat more about the year ahead. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie back with Harry Dent Jr. His website is linked up at coasttocoastam.com. We are talking about 2023 and what we face, and with Harry Dent Jr. It's not that promising, Harry, is it?
Nope. I'm literally saying 2023 will be the worst year since 1973 and 1930, which were the beginning of two of the largest crashes in history, especially the 29 to 32 one. So I mean, again, this started in 2007. I predicted that. I predicted the top of the market starting in the mid-'80s because it's simply a 46-year lag for peak spending on the largest generation in history. It's a very simple calculation, George. Economy would do great from 83 to 2007. Then we would slow into right about now, 2022 to 23. And then the millennials will take us up again from 2024 to 37. That's the general generational trends that are simple. 46 now going on 47-year lag for the quantifiable average peak in spending right from the U.S. Bureau of Labor. I get my statistics right from the government. Very good statistics. So that's the long cycle. But what's happened here is the government's panicked. When the crash in 2008 to 9 was so strong, our subscribers didn't, because we've been saying this would be the crash of a lifetime, the downturn, that 2008 to 23 would be like 1930 to 42, more like a depression, a long depression. So they just pumped up the economy, all central banks. We've been living off of funny money, printed money ever since. And now that's come to an end because they overdid that. The secret is, George, they might have kept this going a little longer if they hadn't panicked over COVID. COVID's a natural virus, okay? Of course people are going to, can't go to work as much or going to get a little sick. Of course, nobody's going to be surprised if the economy slows and think there's something wrong when a virus like this hits. But they couldn't take that, so they stimulated harder than ever, and that's when the inflation came and forced them to tighten. Now they have to tighten, and the economy cannot. I am saying, economists saying, oh, no, the economy's strong, can take. The economy is the weakest on my long-term indicators, which have been more accurate than anybody. The only ones that saw the 2008 downturn in the first place, way before it happened, say we're at our weakest point in the generational and demographic cycles of spending. So the economy cannot take this tightening, and that's why the stock markets are going to keep on crashing until we're down 80-some% plus. And gold has held up and holds up base. But gold will finally crash. Commodities have already crashed, by the way. The whole commodity sector has led this crash. The stimulus has kept stocks up. But gold will go down when the economy goes down strong enough short term, and then gold will be the buy of a lifetime about a year and a half from now, and so will stocks. So the truth is there's no real safe place to hide, George, except for one really good thing. The safest long-term investment has always been the long-term best bonds in the world, the U.S. Treasury bonds, 10 and 30 year. Those are going up with this crash. Those will go up 40, 50, 60% when everything else is crashing, commodities, stocks, real estate. That's the safe haven. Now, we've been told gold would be the safe haven. Well, that was not the case. I just tell people, look at the 2008 crash. Same thing happened there. The first half of it, late 2007 and the mid-2008, gold held up. But then it crashed 45 to 50% when stocks were at their worst in late 2008, early 2009. That's the same scenario here. This crash, and here's my best way to get people to understand it. You went through 2008 and 9 crash, okay? The economy, everything. Multiply that times 150%, 1.5 times. The stock crash will be 1.5 times 57%, 86% the S&P 500. The unemployment will be more like 16% instead of 11%, and so on. So this is a greater magnitude. The best news is this will finally be the last major crash we have in a long time. Governments have put it off, yes, so it'll be even worse. But then the millennials will drive us into another long-term boom starting in mid to late 2024. So you just have to be cautious on all investments for the next year and a half or two max. If you can just sidestep this crash, the real truth is you'll have the buy opportunity of lifetime in everything from gold and commodities to stocks in real estate. And real estate will take the longest to come around. So real estate is the first thing to get out of as quickly as you can. But even stocks, I literally think stocks are going to accelerate down in the next few months. Remember I said it earlier, first crash was into June, bounce into and that was 34% in the NASDAQ. It was 28% or something like that in the S&P. This next crash will be that or bigger, larger, and that's already started. I think that's going to accelerate as soon as we make the new low. Again, the number to watch, the NASDAQ, the lead index here, the tech index, when it breaks 10,088, the last low, we're going to accelerate down. We're only 4% from that now. We're heading back down again. This next wave is in motion. It's going to accelerate soon. This is the last chance to get out of stocks in real estate. But again, everything's going to be on sale. And that's the secret to this. To just sidestep this, everything's going to be on sale by somewhere between mid-2024 and late 2024.
Well, how do you know what a good buy is, Harry?
What's that?
How do you know what a good buy is?
Oh, well, again, the best target I have for stock markets, there's stock markets all around the world. They all have the last big crash was bottomed in March of 2009. That is my best buy target today. Now, we'll refine that when we get to it. I'm looking for that to be the buy target. That is 667 on the S&P 500. That is we've already gone down a lot. That's a way lower. It's 1,300 on the NASDAQ. It is 900 to 1,000 on gold. Gold has held up the best of all commodities. It will go down far less in the end, but I think gold's going to go down 40 to 50%. So I look at the buy targets for stocks as the last major low in March of 2009. So you can look at any stock or any stock index, and you can get a target for that. But again, for the S&P 500, the most well-known global U.S. leading index, 667. That's going to be down 86% from the top on January 4th of 2022. Nobody sees that coming. And I'm telling you, George, by my indicators, I was the only guy that saw how great the boom was going to be in the mid-'80s. Everybody thought this was just a bounce back from our 70s fiasco, and the Asians and Japan was going to take over the world, and America was done. I said, no, greatest boom ever, but great booms are followed by great busts, and now this stimulus plan is the craziest thing. For them to print money, to think you can keep an economy going by simply printing money out of thin air, which always does work in the short term, like crack or cocaine or a bottle of vodka. Any of those things will make you feel good, but of course there's the hangover. We're in the hangover now, and this is not over. It's what I'm saying. Greater the boom, greater the bust. This is going to be the biggest downturn in stocks and the economy of our lifetimes, but there will be a boom to follow with the millennials in the U.S. and in the Western world, but the greatest boom will be in Asia. Southeast Asia and India are going to lead the next boom like U.S. and China led the last one. So we can already tell people where to buy a few years from now. We can get that later if you want to. But right now, everything is going down, even gold, and gold has held up the best. If you have to have a commodity, gold is the best. But gold, as it did in 2008, as this downturn gets worse, gold will finally capitulate as well. So everything's going to be on sale, which means you can only be in the safest treasury bond. The best investment, again, 30-year, 10-year treasury bonds are the safe haven. They went up 50% in the 2008 crash. Again, everything went down in 2008 as well, okay, and 9. The treasury bonds were the only thing. Corporate bonds went down. They had everything with risk. Gold went down in the end, even. And it was the last to fall in commodities, okay? So the safe haven is the Treasury bonds, 10 and 30-year. There's two simple ETFs you can buy, ZROZ, Z-R-O-Z. That's the average 25-year, so more of the longer Treasuries. And TLT is the most liquid. That's 20-year. I like ZROZ, Z-R-O-Z. That has the ability in this crash. Listen to this, George. While stocks go down another 56%, has the ability these bonds could double in value, but only the safest long-term Treasury bonds, ZROZ or TLT. And I like ZRZ because it's longer duration.
Now, how do they appreciate?
Okay, here's what happens. Okay, so bond, basically, you buy a 30-year Treasury bond, which is the safest bond in the world, backed by the U.S. government. And even when things are bad, we're still the best house in a bad neighborhood, as in 2008 and 9. So interest rates, long-term rates, these are long-term rates, they go down when the economy slows. So these Treasury bonds, when interest rates fall and you don't have the risk of default like you do in all other bonds, corporate bonds, those bonds go up in value because the interest rates fall. Oh, you locked in a 3 to 4% rate on that Treasury bond. Now it falls to 1 to 2%. My God, your 3 to 4% Treasury bond is worth way more. So the highest quality bonds go up in the worst of times. Again, everybody thinks gold will be the safe haven. Now, in the 70s, when we're in an inflationary crisis, inflation and then crashing, gold was the best safe haven, okay? In this period where we have deflationary crashes like 2008 to 9, we already saw that. Gold even goes down in the end. It's only the Treasury bonds. That is the set, and AAA corporates. But, hey, 30-year Treasury bonds are better than 20-year AAA corporates. They're the safest of the safe. That is what does well in this, George, and you don't have many choices. So normally a financial economist or advisor like me will give you, okay, we'll buy a mix of all these things. No, it narrows. This is the everything bubble. I'm sure people have heard that. We didn't have an everything bubble even in the roaring 20s, okay? Commodities were down, and real estate peaked much earlier than stock. I mean, this is an everything crash, a once-in-a-lifetime everything crash. You have to get in the safest investment. And if you're really scared to death, just sitting in cash, everything's going to go down, and you're going to be able to buy more with the saved cash. I'm saying these 10 and 30-year Treasury bonds are going to go up 50, 60% or more and give you more cash to jump on the sale of a lifetime. So that's the optimum strategy. Safest bonds. And when we see, and again, I've got my target today. If I had to tell you today, you'd say, Harry, when do you think the stock market will bottom? My guess today would be July 2024. That's my guess today, somewhere in there. When we get closer, it'll be better, but I have targets already. Again, just think anything you're looking back in stock, where did it bottom in March of 2009? That's the best target for any major stock index in the world to where you would buy. So it's really pretty simple. You just get out of the way, and the next boom will be 2024 something into 2037. Will not be as long as the 83 to 2007 baby boom. It's a smaller generation relatively, but it's still a strong one. But if you're invested in Asia or countries where I lecture a lot in Australia, Australia's it looks like Asia. I mean, it has Asian immigrants feeding it, and Australia will be the strongest Western market, Australia and New Zealand, in this next boom. So there's plenty of places to buy ahead. The word here is be safe, get out of everything but the safest bonds, AAA corporates, 10 and 30-year treasuries, ZROZ, Z-R-O-Z, TLT are the easiest way to play that. And you will make money in the downturn instead of lose. And then the buy opportunity like it. Then you can sit back and buy stocks and real estate again and feel good about it and not have to worry about dodging, smaller corrections. This is not my warning, this is not a correction. This is an emergency. You got to get out of financial assets, most of them, and wait just a year and a half or two to rebuy longer term. That's all you got to do.
Will Elon Musk get his $200 million back? $200 billion, rather?
No. I mean, he's one of the bubble stocks. Because people have lost faith in him, just short term, that stock has fallen much more than the NASDAQ. So Tesla's going to get crucified, but Tesla is a growth stock. Tesla would be a stock I would buy. They're the leading edge of a mature market, the car market, but they're the leading edge of it. So Tesla would be a great buy, but it's been hit one of the worst of the tech stocks so far. So it's the wrong place to be now. Great place to buy. I mean, I love indexes. I would.
Well, when do you know when to buy, Harry?
Well, again, when I see the stocks get back to those 2009 lows, that's 667 on the S&P. I got the targets today, Joe. Now, if it's mid to late 2024 and we don't go quite that low, I would start buying. If we go even lower, I would. But I'm going to wait till at least then. But my target today, where I would buy, if I had to put on automatic buy, I would buy around 667 on the S&P 500, around 1,300 on the NASDAQ, and I would buy gold when it gets back to 900 or 1,000.
Interesting. Okay, stay with us, Harry. We're going to take calls with you when we come back. And our special guest, Harry Dent Jr., we're going to take calls with Harry this hour, so get ready to let your fingers do the walking to talk about this financial bubble he predicts for this year. Welcome back to Coast, George Norrie with Harry Dent Jr. and your calls. Harry, I have to tell you this tragic story of a friend of mine. Works in the restaurant business for 30 years, saves every penny he can, accumulated $500,000 in his bank account. In 2022, he was very aggressive with stocks, almost like a gambler. He lost everything but $10,000. Horrible.
Yeah, I always say the greater the boom, the greater the bust. And in this case, we're in a rare bubble era. You have to go all the way back to the roaring 20s to see bubble conditions. And even then, it wasn't global and it wasn't in everything. This is commodities, gold, real estate, global stocks. It's everything. This has never happened before. So everybody, whether you have a couple 100,000 at stake or million or whatever, this is going to be the biggest threat to your financial well-being ever. But it's also the greatest opportunity to see it coming because everybody loves a sale on everything. Boy, if they have to close on sale 20, 50%, people run. People don't see these sales coming and stocks buying at these rare times like the early 80s or the early 30s. Or what I'm saying in the next few years, probably mid-2024, like I said, if I had to say. It's just that your returns are magnified by buying low instead of high. And we know, George, and this is just human nature, and we all do it. The way most people think, the more something goes up, the safer and better they think it is. The smart money, the 1% of people that drive the markets more and make the most money, when they see a market going up too long, they get scared, and when they see it going down, that's when they buy. And this is going to be, again, like 2002, late 2002, late 82, and I'd say mid-2024, maybe late 2020, are going to be the greatest buy opportunities of our lifetime. This is the last great one for a long time. So if you wake up here, and like you say, what do you got to lose here, since things have been up so long and all, and markets haven't been doing so well? Just get safe here, and if I'm right, the world's going to come to you in the next year and a half. The earliest this could be over would be the end of this year. I think the most likely mid-2024, and the latest late 2024. So all you got to do is be safe for this year, and then start to look for buying opportunities. And of course, on my newsletter, we're already warning people now. We're giving the targets like we're giving now, and we'll be able to evaluate better when this bottom's going to be. But this will be the last great buying opportunity till I'll be dead before the next one. Next one.
Well, let's hope not. Gee, here.
40 or something.
How are you so different than the other forecasters?
Well, what most people think is politics. In developed countries that are mature countries, and stuff, it's not that. It's people that drive. I study people. I know what people buy down to potato chips, peak buying at age 41. The U.S. Bureau of Labor surveys thousands of consumers every year, 600 categories of spending. So I know when people spend the most in total, save the most. So spending the most is 46, now moving to 47. Saving the most is it's not when people are supposed to retire at 65. People have the highest savings and net worth at 63 before they start paying it down. But potato chips is 41, but automobiles is 48. You know, you can take any category. I know when people are going to spend money, and people, like everything, are born in waves or cycles. Everything has waves and cycles. The generational cycle, I used to call it 40-year. It's more precisely 39 peaks, major peaks in the stock market, 1929, 1968, and then 2007, natural peaks in the stock market, okay? Technology cycles are 45 years. The demographics are 39 to 40, 45 years. That's my second big cycle. That's the one that is strongest now, but peaked in late 2019, early 2020, and is another reason that we had, you know, the crash, and it has taken so much stimulus to keep this going. And then there's a geopolitical cycle that goes from more favorable to unfavorable. That's the only cycle I have that's starting to turn up around now and will be favorable for 15 to 17 years. So I have three major cycles, and frankly, the best one, my favorite forecaster ever is not an economist. He's a Russian climate scientist, Ivan Milankovitch. He studied those cycles, which there's unbelievable data. Scientists have unbelievable data back, unbelievable time periods. 100,000-year, 41,000-year, and 22,000-year cycle. He has three cycles in a hierarchy, just like my three cycles, 45-year technology, 39-year demographic, generational, and 34 to 35 geopolitical. He has a hierarchy of cycles, and he can predict climate, and he can explain it in the past, and predict it as far as you want to in the future. So it takes, you have to understand, there's endless cycles. What's the most important cycle? In this case, for the economy, I came up with the first one right early in my research in 1982, this 39-year, this generational cycle. And again, we know exactly when people are going to peak in spending. And I said back then that this boom and the economic momentum would peak by the end of 2007, and we would go into a long slowdown. And that's why we've been living off stimulus ever since. So these cycles are clear. It took me a long time. It took me a long time to get the first one. It took longer to get the second and third one. But these three cycles have been consistent since. And that's how you can tell. And the technology cycle is going to be the most powerful the next time around. The demographic cycle will not be as powerful, but it will turn up too. So again, these three cycles tell me when investors can be more aggressive and when you need to be more cautious. And this is the worst. The worst should have been 2008 to 2010, but the government jumped in and cut that in half. They only let that downturn go halfway, half as long, half as far as it should have. So we're going to get the worst on the back end. Now, if I go back in history, 2 generation cycles and 2 technology cycles, we get the 1930s. The worst crash there happened at the beginning, 29 to 32, and then another big crash, 37 to 40, at the end of the cycle. So we're getting the reverse. They cut the first crash down, so we're going to get the worst crash at the end between 2021 and 2024. Okay, so that's what we're in now, and it's still good to get out now. You're going to save a lot by getting out now because we went down, we bounced some. I'm telling you, this next crash, next wave down is already started. As soon as it breaks 10,088, 4% lower than here, that's not much. That's why you have to get out soon. On the NASDAQ, that's the lead index that I track. This market's going to accelerate down again. The next wave's going to be worse than the first one, and then we'll still have one more wave after that. It takes 3 waves, just like 29 to 32 or 72 to 75. 3 waves to complete a crash. We've only seen the first one, and look how bad that was. We have 2 more like that or more ahead of us into 2024. That's what I'm saying. So this is, I've been the most bullish forecaster in history. I was criticized in the 80s for being too bullish, especially on America, and I was right about it. I forecast a Dow of 10,000 by 2000. Back in the mid 80s, people thought I was crazy. It went high. It went to 12. It went higher than that. I underestimated it. So This is the flip side of that. Now you have to take into account you don't get a great boom without a great bust. And particularly since 2009, this boom has been 100% artificial. The first one into 2007 was real, was 90% real, 10% stimulus. This is all stimulus, which makes it even more vulnerable. You just got to get out of the way, George. It's the simplest thing. If you just go to cash and sit for the next year and a half, you're going to be a very happy camper, and your neighbor's going to be saying, what were you doing? How the hell did you do this?
How do you do it? Let's take some calls. Mayat in New York. Hi, Mayat.
Yes, Happy New Year to the beloved Coast family and to you and Harry. And, Harry, don't be shy in your responses. That's a joke. You're obviously very passionate, but what I want to know, as an inventor, and an inventor that has something that's right now that's rather extraordinary and that could change humanity in a positive way, and that's because of its utilitarian nature, a billion-dollar nature. So I want, especially as a woman, I want your thoughts and ideas, your hooks in terms of the innovation, getting new ideas and new technology and new products out. And if you have my question, I'll listen over the air and bring some good news, too. Thank you, George.
Well, again, when I first got the demographic cycle, I realized young people are the innovators. So innovation is the highest, like it was in the 70s, when people are young entering the workforce. And then the boom comes after, and then those innovations get drawn in the mainstream. So all innovations start. It's called an S-curve. It takes the same time to go from 1% to 10% of a market with a new product. And then when it catches on and hits critical mass, it goes from 10 to 90 in the same time, 9 times. So the S-curve is the real key principle for innovators. And so what we've had, we've seen the peak of the last wave of innovations with this boom in 2020. This crash, innovators do the best in downturns. That's when entrepreneurs do the best and large corporations do the worst with the older products. So this crash is only going to give more fire to entrepreneurial companies and entrepreneurs. And then those new products are going to accelerate from 2024 to 2037 and then in this next boom. So innovation is a part of my cycle. It's partly the young part of a generation. The millennials are in that innovation cycle now, but it's also the technology or innovation cycle is actually a 45-year cycle where the demographic and generational spending cycle is a 39-year cycle. So it's a slightly different cycle, and I'm monitoring both. The technology cycle is going to be the strongest one coming out of this downturn. So entrepreneurs and people should be doing what they're doing now, innovating now, promoting as much as you can now, and then really be looking to get strong in your promotion and get aggressive in this boom because every new boom, every new big advance in the market brings not just a revamping of the older companies did well, it's going to bring a whole new set. The entrepreneurs that are doing well now will shine in this 2024 to 2037 next boom. And it will be the millennials moving into their peak spending. The baby boomers are going to be dying in this next boom, okay? So the entrepreneurs want to be targeting the up-and-coming millennials and realize that, yes, maybe it's a little tough right now with markets down and the economy slow. When this thing turns around, it will be the most entrepreneurial products and new emerging products that do the best in the next boom. That's always the case.
Next up, let's...
Or at their best in downturns is what I'm saying. That's when they thrive, and then the fruits of it come in the next boom. But this is entrepreneurs like you that are the people who really are set to do best.
Let's go to Clyde in Richmond, Virginia. Take it away, Clyde. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Dent. First of all, I'd like to say I agree with you. I believe the S&P 500 will fall to 1250 or below on or before March 31st, 2025. But my question is, can the current worker shortage, especially in the services industry, can that be explained by demographics? In other words, 20 years ago, was there low birth rates and there just not any workers to be had, or is it the people are spoiled and don't want to go back to work?
Yeah. I have a workforce growth for number one, and this is the biggest shock of my research, that first of all, generations cause boom, just as they simply grow up and spend more money in their particular place. But the other side, workforce growth is the biggest correlator with inflation. And workforce growth has been slowing since the baby boomers fully entered the workforce by 1980, okay, in 1981. So, and that was, a 20-year. They enter the workforce at age 20 on average, just like they peak at spending 46. So workforce has been slowing, okay? And that means inflation's been slowing, and that's what's been so good for bonds. Normally, in a boom like this, bonds won't do as well and stocks will do great. Well, bonds and stocks have both been booming. Bonds have been benefiting from falling inflation and workforce growth, and stocks have been benefiting from the maturing of the baby boom generation, and now the millennials will cause another wave for stocks, okay? And bonds, see, here's the difference. Bonds and stocks have done well. When we get through this crash, I'm no longer going to be recommending you buy 10 and 30-year Treasury bonds. They're going to have very low yields, and inflation is not going to drive those yields back up and give you better yields and stuff, and they're going to have done their thing in the crash. So the safe bonds are great now, but you got to get back in stocks, and then corporate bonds with higher risk but higher yields will do better in the next boom. But you're never going to get strong yields on bonds again. Inflation's going to remain low because overall it's workforce growth, and it's the big trend here is the retirement of the baby boom. And again, my workforce, I can forecast workforce in the future. It's 20 for entry minus 63 for average retirement. Average entry at 26. So workforce growth is going to remain, even in the next boom, the workforce growth is going to remain slow. So we're not going to have inflation. And bond yields are going to be low. So you're really going to want to switch and be in stocks for this next boom. And stocks and bonds will not do as well in this next boom like they did in the last one when you had rising economy but also falling inflation and interest rates. Interest rates will edge up, which will be moderately negative for bonds, corporate and treasuries, and the stocks will shine because of the demographics.
Harry, what you do is well done, but it's not rocket science. Why haven't some of these other forecasters jumped on board with you?
I hate to say this. I mean, I started off as an economics major in college. And after the third course, I'm like, this is boring. It's vague. Economists always like, well, on this hand and that hand. Well, you can see I'm not that way. So I ended up taking everything else in business, accounting, finance, marketing, management, everything else but economics after my first few courses. But I still had this, I did start as an economic major. So after I studied all this stuff and started looking at the economy as a business consultant to Fortune 100 and then the new ventures, I started realizing, wait a minute, but this logic, all these things I learned can be useful to business, and learn all these things can predict the economy. And that's, again, the demographic cycle was the first one I got. I kept saying, what drives the economy? What correlates to the economy? I saw this baby boom coming, and I'm like, well, what? Oh, then I looked up when people spend the most money, 46, and I saw, well, if I just take a 46-year lag on the birth index when people spend the most money, oh, guess what? It's the best correlation with the stock market of any indicator ever. That was one of those insights, accidental insights that came from just deep research. Like saying, when do people spend money? When are people the most productive? These things you can find if you search. Economists think it's all politics and government policy. Well, in a third world dictatorship economy, yeah. In mature Western economies and now Eastern economies in Japan and China now rising and India, no, it's demographics is the most important factor. And technology has its own cycle. And I had to dig and find these cycles. And now I have 3 cycles, which will explain past and future, just like this Milankovitch guy who came up with 3 cycles for longer-term climate change. So I learned from the greatest forecaster in science and ended up coming up with a similar model for the economy. And again, the breakthrough was demographics in the early 80s. I started predicting stuff. Nobody thought the U.S. would come back like it did and inflation would fall as rapidly as it did. My indicators were simple in that, but my indicators got better when I found the technology cycle and the geopolitical cycle. So there's 3 dimensions to this, The demographics is the easiest to understand. But they're all three of these cycles you need to see the whole thing.
The whole picture. Harry, we'll come back and take final calls next. Next hour, Patrick Spain joins us to talk about cryptoids, little creatures. I'm looking forward to that. It's been a while since we've done a program like that. And welcome back to our final segment. George Norrie with you, Harry Dent Jr. with us. Harry, your website, of course, is where people can get all kinds of information on your work and your research publications.
Yeah, harrydent.com. There you'll get on our free newsletter, and it's a hefty free newsletter. You get 2 articles a week, one from me and one from my partner, and a rant from me every other Friday, every other week, and that's for free. And then, of course, that's to introduce people who like what they hear and can get on our paid newsletter where we give you the whole banana. But you can't get wrong listening to us for free until you see either the stock market further confirm what we're saying or you really get our logic, because our logic really is unique. Frankly, George, as I said earlier, because I didn't study normal economics. If normal economics was good, economists would be a lot better at forecasting the economy, and they almost never see the great booms or the great busts when they come. So that's my recommendation. Just try us out for free at harrydent.com.
Let's go back to the calls west of the Rockies. Michael in Tucson, Arizona. Hey, Michael, thanks for holding.
Well, thanks for putting me on.
You are quite welcome.
I'm going to be 70 years old this year. I'm still working. I'll probably work another year. But my question is, what do I do with my 401?
Okay, yeah, I am turning 70 in May also, so I'm with you there on the age factor, and fortunately, people at 70 aren't as old as my grandparents were when I was growing up.
No, that's a good point. The 70's the new 55.
Yeah, exactly. It really is like that, but you know, you have to look at your 401k. You have more limited options there. What you want to do is the safest options. Okay, so if they have government bonds, you know, U.S. Treasury bonds, if that's an option, you want to choose that. In the longest term, the duration. If they have a fund that's got 10 to 20-year Treasury bonds, the next best is high-quality AAA or the highest quality corporate bonds. And you know what? The truth is, if there aren't many other good choices, all they have is a normal corporate bond fund, which would be the next choice, but not optimal. Then you just go to cash for a while. We're not talking a long period of time. I'd say, again, a year and a half from now, this should prove out, number one, but we should be over the worst of it. So you're only, you know, giving up the normal gains and at a time when everything's falling, and everything is falling just about except the highest quality bonds. So you get in the safest choices they offer you. And if there aren't any, if they just have a normal corporate bond fund, well, bonds can go down substantially at a time because interest rates may go down, which is good for bonds, but default risk on normal bonds, not the Treasury bond, goes up. So even these corporate bonds go down. So pick the safest choice, and if not, just go to cash for a while.
Simple enough. Michael, thank you. Next up, we have Connie in Florida. Connie, you're on with Harry Dent Jr.
Hi, George. It's so good to talk to you. I love you to death. But listen, I've been worried about you for a while. I've been wanting to ask you a question for a long time. And my question is, what will you do if they make the gold illegal for you to hold again? And what will you do? What you'll be burying it in the backyard like?
I'm not concerned about that. Harry, how about you?
Yeah. Me not. I mean, gold is gold. Again, this happened before. I'm telling you, it's going to happen again. Gold went sideways when things started crashing in 2008. Okay, for the first half of the gold held up. It didn't go up, but it held up. But it went crashing and running to mommy like everything else because everything deflates. We're in a deflationary trend. We have not seen this since the 1930s. That's why economists don't understand it. So gold is a good place to be. The biggest driver of gold is not going to be inflation in the future. It's going to be India being the next China, because Indians love gold and buy it for jewelry and decor more than anybody on earth. So gold is not the place to be. First of all, people think it'll protect against crash, but it will be a good investment again a year and a half or 2 years now with stocks. But nothing will beat stocks, and Asian stocks will do the best. So I wouldn't worry about them making it illegal to buy gold. I do not see that happening. They did that back in the 30s. It was unpopular, and that's not going to really be the problem. See, all these central banks that have been overstimulating the economy, they're the ones that are going to lose credibility. Governments are going to lose credibility. That's why I tell people, get in the safest bonds. That's where the money will run. It'll even run out of gold here. And I think gold's probably done about as well. Again, same thing. It's been more flat, okay, in the early stage of this. Next stage is gold goes down when everything else goes down. So there's no place to hide other than cash or like the best, 10 and 30-year U.S. Treasury bond. People say, oh, the U.S. government's in debt. Yeah, but so is every other government in the world, and we're the best house in a bad neighborhood and the biggest house. And like in 2008 and 2009, our Treasury bonds went up the most. It was the best single investment in the world in 2008 crash. That's all you have to do. Buy safe U.S. Treasury bonds. The safest investment does best here. And even if you're wrong, it's still a safe, high-quality investment.
We're taking final calls with Harry Dent Jr. Here's Zeke in Oceanside, California. Zeke, welcome.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and a Happy New Year to y'all. I'm 70 as well, so it's the 70 club tonight. I want to give you all my take on what really causes the housing bubble. And anybody that's ever owned a house knows that the first 10 years that they pay on it all goes to interest. And then they turn around and try and sell it, and they have no real equity. So what do? They raise the price of the house, and so does everybody else in the neighborhood. And that's what causes the housing bubble. Now, there's a solution to that, and the solution is to get rid of the APR and go to a straight-line mortgage. So at the end of 10 years, you actually have, let's say you buy a house for $100,000, and over the life of the loan, you're going to pay off $300,000. So at the end of you pay $10,000 a year. At the end of 10 years, you should have $100,000 in equity instead of the $5,000 you actually have now. So that's the deal. What's your take on it?
Okay, really quick. Housing bubbles are never as strong as stock bubbles, but this is rare. This is the second housing bubble and the second technology-driven stock bubble. This is rare to happen. You saw what happened last time. Housing, you can't go down. They're not making any more. Blah, blah, blah. No, housing went down 34%. And when you have an 80% mortgage against that or 60%, you are underwater. You actually have negative equity, unlike stocks that just go down whatever percent they got. So the mortgages make real estate more risky than it appears. This bubble is a second bubble, and it's greater than the first. And but last time is a 34% crash. I am just saying, listen to this. We go just back to the 2012 lows. The housing went down from 2006 to 2012. Just back to the last lows will be 50% for the average house in the U.S. and much more for upscale housing. Housing's going to be the biggest bust ever, bigger than the Great Depression. Housing did not bubble as much because governments didn't push interest rates as low. And interest rates, you're talking about interest rates, also governments made long-term interest rates as well as short-term far lower than the markets would have, and that was a big part of the housing bubble. People could get much bigger house at the same mortgage, so they bought bigger houses, bigger mortgages, and so the housing bubble is going to be the biggest we've ever seen in history when it burst, and probably bigger than we ever see in the future. So I tell people real estate is the biggest, going to be the burst thing because real estate is mortgaged with debt. Stocks, most people don't buy stocks on debt. They buy houses up to 80, 90% in debt. So people are going to get the worst hit by housing, and housing is going to take the longest to come out of this. So, I mean, people don't think about selling their house. Hey, if it's the house you're going to live in the rest of your life or you're retired in, maybe. But I'm telling you, you got to get serious about real estate, not just stocks here for the first time. Real estate's going to go down more than any time in history, past or future, as far as I can see. So take that seriously as well.
We'll take some more calls with Harry Dent Jr. Maria is with us in Illinois. Hello, Marie.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call.
Sure.
Let me preface. I've never done anything to do with investing. I'm on a government program. I mean, I get basically a check every month on disability, but I have a friend that he's very much into like stocks and everything. He's obsessed with cryptocurrency, and he's constantly telling me that that now's the time to buy, now's the time to buy, now's the time to buy, because he keeps talking about how we're in a bear market right now, and like he keeps saying then in a couple of years we're going to be in a bull market, and he's always telling me that I should invest now, in stocks and in something called Fidelity, whatever Fidelity is. And in stocks, he's always telling me that I should invest in like a bunch of different kinds of cryptocurrency, because, you can buy them, I guess, they cost like, a quarter of a penny right now or whatever. And he says that all this stuff is going to like skyrocket and go up, a couple of years from now. And I was just wondering what your take is on that. I've never invested in anything. I know nothing about investments or stocks or, anything like that. But he keeps telling me to invest in cryptocurrency, things like that, and how we're in a bear market now. And within a year and a half to 2 years, he says that now is the time to buy because...
Okay, let me stop you there. He is right about it. It is going to be the time to buy this. And listen to me here. Do not listen to him on this. This is not the time to buy yet, okay? The bigger the bubble, the bigger the burst. Governments push this bubble way longer and way higher than ever in history, and it has to come back down to reality. In reality, I can measure as the last lows in the stock market, and crypto is the next big thing. I'm a big touter of it, okay? But Bitcoin has bubbled more than anything, and crypto has bubbled the most. I have direct comparisons in my research to the dot-com bubble that peaked in early 2000 and crashed even more than the stock market, bigger bubble, bigger burst, and this. Crypto is the next big thing. It's the digitization of all financial assets and money, and that's a number I can put 600 trillion on. It's the biggest financial number in the world, all financial assets, okay? It's a big deal. It's in its infancy. It's had its baby bubble. It's been the biggest bubble of this bubble, just like the dot-com. So I'm comparing Bitcoin to Amazon and the the cryptocurrencies in general to the dot-com bubble. And it's following it exactly, and it has a lot farther to go. The key is what your friend is saying, a year and a half to two from now, and I've been saying that all night tonight. That's when you buy. If you buy here, you got to remember, if something goes from $90 down to 20 cents, okay, it's down 80%, and it just drops down to 10, it's down another 50%. So there's a lot of downside here. It is premature. If you listen to this guy and buy now, I am telling you, you're going to have a lot of pain. And that's my forecast. And you can listen to him or me. I'm just telling you, I have a lot better track record at predicting these type of big movements up and down. There will come a time, and it will be, and I've said this many times tonight, to Georgia, this is going to be the buy opportunity of your lifetime, but it is too early now. We have started this crash. Crashes of this magnitude take, and look at history, 72 to 75 and 29 to 30. It takes 2.5 to 3 years to work this out, okay? We're only a year into this. It's too early to buy things are going a lot lower. And the best bargain, I'll tell you right now, what I'm looking at to buy Bitcoin, 3,250. I may change that a bit when we get to it. That is simply going back to the last low from the bubble before this one that peaked in 2017 and crashed into late 2018, early 2000. Bitcoin gets to 3,250. That's going to be the buy of opportunity, something that I predict to go to 500,000 to 1 million in the decades to follow that. So it is too early to buy. This is not a normal correction. It's not a normal crash. It's the crash of our lifetime. You can only compare it to 29 to 32 or late 72 to early 75, the two bigger generational crashes before it. You can't compare this to normal corrections. So it's right. But the key is what he's saying, 1.5 years from 2.5. Wait 1.5 years to 2, and then look at this, and then you can buy.
Harry will get you back this year, and we'll see how you did. Harry Dent Jr., his website linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Up next, a couple hours of cryptos. Up next, Pat Spain joins us as we talk about crypto hunting, and we're not talking about digital crypto either. Bigfoot, snakes, you name it, he's got it. He's a Travel Channel legend hunter. Pat Spain joins us next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Pat Spain, wildlife biologist, cryptozoologist, biotech expert, presenter on television, keynote speaker, author, of course. Several of his books included the ones I just mentioned, with a passion for adventure. Pat is always seeking his next greatest escapade and the opportunity to add to this ever-growing list of things that have bitten or stung him. As the great-nephew of the prophet of the unexplained, Charles Fort. You've heard of Fortean times and everything? Charles Fort. Pat thinks of himself as carrying on a family tradition by questioning mainstream science, considering unusual explanations for the bizarre phenomena, and generally investigating those things that most people write off as nearly impossible. Pat, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
Tell me a little bit more about what I read, which was pretty comprehensive anyway.
So I've had a pretty strange life, and I guess a lot of it is summarized by just looking for answers, just trying to find out the things that I can't read about myself. I'd like to get out there and try to figure them out.
Did you know what Charles Fort did when he did it in those days?
So the really interesting thing about my connection with Fort is that I was reading his books before realizing that I was related to him. My grandmother on my father's side, I was always a kind of strange kid, and I was always obsessed with animals. I was out there finding every type of animal you can imagine and raising them in the house. And my grandmother used to say, "You're just like your Uncle Charlie." And I had no idea who she was talking about until many years later when I was in high school and she saw me reading a Charles Fort book. And she said, "That's your Uncle Charlie." I said, "What do you mean?" And then she kind of brought out a whole bunch of his first editions that were signed and showed me all of this that, had been given to her by her parents. And it just all started clicking into place.
What got you interested in the crypto world?
So I've always been fascinated by the natural world, and cryptozoology really is an extension of biology, and kind of the stranger animals were the ones that intrigued me the most. So when I was out there, I studied marine biology in school, and I always wanted to go to the deep oceans to study what could possibly be in there. And when a little kid sees the first story about, the giant squid or some other mysterious creature from the depths, you can kind of start to foster that interest and that imagination and thinking that there's a lot more out there that we don't know about. And the deep ocean represents that to me. So that was my original introduction to cryptozoology, was the deep sea squid and just the general ocean mysteries. And that kind of sparked me looking into, well, what other animals, what other mysterious creatures might be out there? And that is the definition of cryptozoology.
Have you really been bitten or stung by creatures?
Oh, just about everything you can think of. Yeah, I've been bitten by, a small black bear, by a neotropical rattlesnake, which was really, really nasty, a rabid raccoon, bullet ants, a whole bunch, just about everything out there.
What was the worst bite, Pat? The rattlesnake?
So So a lot of people think the rattlesnake would be, and that was not fun for sure, but luckily that was a dry bite. So about 25% of the time that rattlesnakes bite, they don't inject any venom. So I got very, very lucky on that one. The worst bite for me was a rabid raccoon. And I was studying oysters down in Maryland, and on my lunch break, I was kind of just hanging out reading a book, and heard a noise, and my friends and I had been having a water balloon fight all day. So I thought it was one of my friends sneaking up on me, and it turned out to be this raccoon. So I saw it jumping at me, and that's really unusual. Raccoons are usually, they'll keep their distance. So I put my arm up to block, and the raccoon latched onto my arm and started just shaking its head and spraying, saliva and foam and blood everywhere. And we tussled for a little while before I finally, kind of kicked it and got it to run away, and was rushed to the hospital and had to get, a whole bunch of shots that day. Had to get shots in my arm, in my thighs, in my butt, in each one of the bites. It was wild. And so that was definitely the worst bite. I ended up with some pretty good scars from that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, we talk about cryptids. What creatures come to mind?
So most people think of kind of the big, like the big two are Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot. Those are the ones that, everyone has heard of, everyone has heard something about. But really, cryptozoology goes a lot deeper than that. And they're these strange, little creatures from all over the world that have become kind of persistent myths and legends. And there's also just stories of creatures that sound more commonplace. It's eventually, a lot of them are discovered to be these real flesh and blood creatures. The skull-faced macaque is one that comes to mind pretty recently. So a primate species that was very recently named in Southeast Asia. So when I was looking for cryptids on this show, Beast Hunter, we took kind of a blend of some of the more outlandish-sounding ones, like the Mongolian deathworm, and something more like Caddy, so a Canadian sea serpent, which there's a lot of different, flesh and blood creatures that can be used to explain this.
I've picked up in your books, the three that I have, some very strange, embarrassing situations for you. What are some of the stories?
So throughout my adventures, I'm kind of the ultimate fish out of water. So I was thrown into these, various situations in different cultures that I really didn't know too much about, and that can lend to some pretty interesting situations. So one of my favorites was in Mongolia. The plan was for me to do this traditional Mongolian wrestling, which folks have seen footage of this. You've seen, some photos and things. You wear these tiny little bikini briefs and this little shirt that just covers your arms and back, actually. And then you do this wrestling. And I'm not a big guy. People hear Beast Hunter, Legend Hunter, they think of, some big professional wrestler. I'm a science nerd. This is not, my forte. But this was a way to show respect to the culture and a way to kind of integrate myself with a group of people who I was going to be asking them some really detailed explanations about their history and their culture. And I wanted them to trust me, so I thought, well, this would be a good way to do this. So the whole plan was for me to learn how to wrestle, so to get some tips and tricks from one of the one of the nation's top wrestlers, and then to put it into use in the ring. So it comes time, it's about an hour before I'm supposed to wrestle, and all of a sudden this enormous man just comes over and picks me up as if I was a child, just lifts me up under his arm and carries me into a tent and starts stripping off all of my clothes. And I'm standing there going, what's going on? Is this supposed to be happening? And there's a whole crowd that kind of gathers around, and they're all laughing, and this guy's just literally ripping off my shirt, pulling down my pants. He's lifting me up in the air, and people are taking my shoes off. They put me in this traditional wrestling outfit that, fits very, very snugly, and starts, this guy just slaps my butt and pushes me into this ring. And there's no prep, there's no explanation of what's going on. People are screaming in another language.
You don't know who you're going to wrestle, right, at this time?
No idea what's going on, no idea what's happening. And all of a sudden I'm standing there with this giant of a man just in this wrestling ring with a couple thousand nomadic herders all forming a circle around us watching. And this person who was supposed to have been my coach just yells in English, "Dance like an eagle." And I don't know what's happening. So I start kind of roaming around the ring, and everyone starts laughing. And then the wrestling begins, and it ends about 2 seconds later with the guy just sweeping my leg and throwing me to the ground. And the next thing I know, the announcer says something else in a different language that I don't know, and everyone starts laughing again. And it turns out what he said is, the American doesn't think he's done his best, so we're going to have him wrestle a child.
I love
and that's
that.
what happened. Then I wrestled a child who also beat me really, really bad.
Have you ever been afraid?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the toughest thing about these shoots are, or about, just traveling in general, is the actual traveling part of it. So the animals I can deal with. I've been working with dangerous animals my entire life, but on some of these shoots, the least control that you have is in the travel aspect of it. So at one point, we were barreling down these dirt roads with, human-sized potholes on red clay in West Africa, going between the Congo and Cameroon and the Central African Republic. And we're barreling down these roads at, 80 miles an hour in a truck that has the odometer stopped reading at 400,000 miles, so no idea what's going on. It had broken down multiple times, and all of a sudden flames start shooting out of the dashboard while we're going. And the driver just reaches over and starts hitting the flames with his hand while he's driving, while he's flying down these roads as we're begging him to stop and pull over. And this is just normal, commonplace. So yeah, the travel aspect of it can definitely be the most kind of nerve-wracking.
Pat, I'm going to throw out some cryptids, and I want your explanation, yes or no, that they exist, and what they may be if they don't exist the way people think. Are you ready?
Sure.
Let's start with the chupacabra. People are seeing this strange little creature.
Yeah, so chupacabra, I think the best explanation for chupacabra are different species with mange or with other diseases. I think that they live in pretty harsh environments, so they're often seen in desert environments, and mange is not uncommon in the areas where it's seen. And there's a lot of different animals. Animals look so weird when they have mange. I mean, even someone who sees these animals all the time and knows them pretty well, it's very easy for them to be mistaken identity. So it could be anything from just about any mammal species that lives in those areas with mange would look really, really unusual.
Sasquatch, what are people looking at? What are they seeing?
So Sasquatch, I think, is a fascinating one. In the Pacific Northwest, I wouldn't 100% rule out the possibility that there is a large unknown mammal that folks are seeing, but I think the majority of sightings are probably mistaken identity for a bear. The majority.
That's interesting. All. Interesting indeed. Werewolves.
So werewolves, I think also mistaken identity, probably for bears, for wolves, for other large mammals.
All right, that's interesting too. What else is out there?
So the Mapinguari in Brazil, I think, is one of the great ones that I really thought was most likely mistaken identity until I actually got down there and started doing the investigation myself. And with that one, I think that what people are seeing are a giant ground sloth. And most people would say that this went extinct about 10,000 years ago. But we do know that remnant populations of ground sloths survived in different spots in the world. In the Isle of Hispaniola, for example, they survived until much more recently. They were smaller than what we classically think of with the Megatherium, the really big ground sloth. But I think in Brazil, just based on the location where they're sighted and the people who live there, their history, their stories, the way that they would deal with a creature like a giant ground sloth, I think that there is still a remnant population down there.
Fascinating. It really is. And why can't we find one of these or catch one of these?
So in that one in particular, so the giant ground sloth, it really comes back to the culture of the people who live there. And this was why I really love doing the investigation through a cultural anthropology kind of focus. because when you say giant ground sloth surviving in an area, people say that's impossible. There's no way we would have seen one. We would have gotten a photo of one. But it's a really harsh environment. It's very difficult to get to, and it's protected by the government. So you can't go to this area because there are uncontacted tribes. So I was not in the uncontacted tribes, but I was able to meet with some of the tribes that are still protected by this government organization in Brazil, where in order to even go into the area, you have to have a health exam, you have to get special permission, you have to get a license, in order to enter into this region. And then you go even further, and as I said, there's uncontacted tribes. So that takes a lot of it's very, very difficult to get in there, as it should be, because we could potentially introduce disease or other issues with the tribes. So their stories and their legends are such that this Mapinguari, that they call it, is so other, it's so different from humans, that if they ever hear the call of a Mapinguari, they have to leave the area and never go back. So my theory is that throughout history, because of this legend, because of this story, and because of the protections afforded to the indigenous peoples in the area, when they would be leaving an area, so they hear the call of the Mapinguari, they have to leave the area, they're actually creating wildlife refuges. They're creating an area where animals, can thrive without any type of human interaction. So if the Western world can't go there because of the protections, and the indigenous people don't go there because of their culture and their history and these stories and legends about the Mapinguari, then they're creating nature preserves.
Have you ever hit roadkill and dragged it into your car and ate it?
I have not.
But you've had some strange stuff.
I have eaten some pretty weird things. That is true, yes. So throughout the travels, a lot of times I don't really know what I'm eating, and I'm okay with that. I'm a very adventurous eater. I like to try new things. That's actually what I ask for every year for Christmas. They're just some weird foods. I have a list of things that my wife has been looking for me for years. But on these shoots, I rarely know what it is that someone has put in front of me, and the strangest are usually the fruits and vegetables that it's just impossible to even compare them to anything else. There's this delicious fruit that grew on a tiny little mountain in Sumatra, really, really isolated way out there, that looked like a bowl of frog's eggs, and you kind of slurp it down, and it has this delicious citrusy texture, or citrusy flavor, rather. And then there's the stuff that's not so great. So in Sumatra, we were served this, huge bowl of rice and other, grains and things, but then there was this meat on top of it, and we couldn't figure out exactly what the meat was until we saw some cats kind of run by outside, and the chef pointed out there and said, "Yes, there it is. That's the chicken." We're like, "Oh, that's not chicken."
Now, how many of these small books have you written?
I have six books. 4 of them just came out on January 1st, and the other 2 will come out February 1st.
I have 3 of them. I have A Living Dinosaur. I have 200,000 Snakes, which we'll talk about, and then I have A Little Bigfoot.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, so that's Sumatra, West Africa, and Manitoba, Canada.
You've traveled to all these places?
I have, yeah. So a couple of them were for this show called Beast Hunter, and then one of them was the 200,000 Snakes was the way that I kind of showed myself that I could still do this after being diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer.
Oh, my God.
Going through about a year of treatment of, chemo, surgeries,
sure.
Multiple dozens of surgeries.
Are you okay? Are you okay?
I am, yeah. I'm doing great now. Thank you so much.
Good for you. Take turmeric, Pat. It's a spice.
I've heard, yes, I do. I have some of it here, and I use it in a lot of cooking. But I've had, some really good turmeric drinks and other things with that.
And 3 almonds a day. That's what Edgar Casey talked about.
Very good.
Charles Fort knew him.
Yes. Yeah, Charles Fort is just a fascinating guy. I mean, some of his biographies really just open up so many different windows and so many things that I didn't know about the man, even being related to him.
He was the Twilight Zone before there was Rod Serling.
That's right.
He came up with all these incredible things. He really has. Have you heard of the Gigantopithecus?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yep, the theory. One of the theories about what Bigfoot could possibly be.
Is that possible?
I tend to, I mean, anything's possible, I guess we could say, but I tend to go, kind of move away from that theory a little bit. So we only know of Gigantopithecus from a few very small bone fragments.
And a couple witnesses. Hold on, Pat, we're at a break. We'll come back and chat more. Welcome back, Pat Spain with us. Pat, what's it like being surrounded by 200,000 snakes?
Surreal. Lovecraftian.
Now I know how Indiana Jones freaked out, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the smell is overwhelming. Even before you even talk about the feel of them or anything, just the smell is so bizarre. I ended up having to sell my car when I got back to Boston because the car smelled so bad after this excursion.
You had snakes in your car?
No, just covered, like permeating my clothes and my friends' clothes who were filming it.
Really?
Oh, it was unreal. Yeah, we drove about 34 hours from Boston up to Manitoba, spent a day and a half laying in the snake pits, and just being absolutely covered. I mean, you could reach your arm down 3 feet deep in snakes and just let them pour over your hands like water, just running all over, going down my shirt, down my pants, through my boots, just everywhere you can think of, tons and tons of snakes, and the musk that they're releasing and just the scent, it was pretty powerful.
Knowing what you know, if you could go back and reinvestigate all the things you've done, which one would you do?
I would head back to Sumatra. I think that the possibility of orang pendek is. I think there's a very, very high likelihood that it was there, at least until very, very recently, if there aren't still a few older individuals that are still roaming around in the forests of Sumatra.
Why do you call it a little Bigfoot?
So when we think of Bigfoot, when we think of the stories about Bigfoot in America, we think of this, 8-foot-tall hominid. And in Sumatra, it's described as much smaller, maybe maxing out at 3.5 feet or so. So it's kind of the best way, I think, for the American audience is to think of it as like a little Bigfoot.
Interesting take. Fascinating, isn't it? What keeps fueling you?
Just the drive to know what's out there, that there are still, I love that there are still mysteries in the world and that, we haven't discovered everything and there are still places where, humans have either never been or are a complete oddity. I mean, one of the mountains that I climbed in Sumatra, we were told by the guides that, there's probably been less than 10 humans that we, in modern era at least, who have ever been on this mountain. And it's just wild to think of that we think that everything is covered in, GPS locations and you can zoom in on Google Earth and just about everywhere. But there are still places where, humans just don't go.
We're going to take your calls next hour with Pat Spain. Share your stories of creatures if you've run into one, or just ask him a question or two as well. Fascinating. I think, for me, too, the Bigfoot story would be the big one.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, the Patty footage just still baffles people. It's still one of those things that I point to and just don't have a great explanation for. I don't. When I look at it, I do see a non-human mammal walking upright, in the mountains of California. That's just wild. It was bizarre, and nobody could get any of them to say it was fraud. They wouldn't admit it. No, absolutely, and adamant about it. And they've tried to do recreations. They've tried to look at what movie props, what other things would have been available at the time, and they just haven't been able to do it. Strange times ahead. What do you think the worst injury is you've gotten from an animal? So the rabid raccoon bite was definitely the scariest because that hurt. There's only been one person, I believe, who's ever survived rabies, and they were left pretty badly damaged after that. So that was a little bit freaky. But they rushed me to the hospital, and it was actually the nurse's first day at the hospital. No. So her first time giving anyone a shot, and here she's giving me like 18 shots that day. So as they're giving me the ones in the bites, the nurse started crying because whenever she would hit the bone on my arm, I'd kind of flinch. So she's apologizing and crying. So I end up like kind of trying to comfort her while she's giving me the shots, going, "You're doing a great job."
She knew she hurt you, right?
Oh, yeah. So that was pretty rough. The rattlesnake was, like I said, as soon as I knew it was a dry bite, I just felt really dumb. The bullet ants in Brazil. So I participated in this ritual with the Satare Mawe indigenous peoples. And this ritual involves getting stung hundreds of times in your hands by bullet ants, which have the worst sting in the world. And that, made me hallucinate. It made me absolutely lose my mind. I tackled our sound guy. I, headbutted our producer. I just completely lost my mind for, a good 24 hours.
Pat, would you put spiders in this category?
I love spiders. So whenever
you love spiders? What's wrong with you?
Yeah, so they eat the bugs that are really dangerous. When I was in the Central African Republic, I ended up getting Loa worm, which is a parasite that's given to you by a type of fly, a type of biting fly. So that's what freaks me out. Parasites are terrifying to me.
Now wait a minute. The fly bites you and it goes into your bloodstream?
The fly bites you, and a parasite comes from the fly bite, kind of like malaria when you think of, from a mosquito bite.
Right.
So this is a Loa worm, and if you get it once, as I did, you're getting thousands of these little worms in your bloodstream, and your body fights them off. They die, and you just get really itchy. So your whole body's itchy. The palms of my hands were itchy. The bottoms of my feet, my face, everything is itchy with the worms being kind of filtered out of your blood.
Do you have to go to the hospital every time you're on an event?
Well, there's been quite a few. My wife has gotten very good at handling calls from the hospital.
Tom was telling me you'd be a great guest if we went to Boston for a live stage show. I'm not sure I want to sit next to you.
I've been cleared. It's been a few years since I've traveled anywhere, and I'm medically cleared for everything.
That's fantastic. So what's the big breakthrough for you or anybody who investigates cryptids?
I think whenever a new large species is discovered, it's a moment of celebration. One of the tough things about cryptozoology is that unless you find the exact animal that the legends describe, then people tend to write it off as unimportant. So, like an example would be the Yeti. So we think of the Yeti as a giant, hominid, a human-like mammal, human-like primate species. And it may not be. What if it's a new type of bear? So if somebody found a new species of bear in the region where the Yeti is described, I think a lot of biologists would celebrate that, and a lot of people would be really, really excited. But the general public wouldn't believe that it's the Yeti unless it was exactly what they're expecting the Yeti to be. And that's one of the toughest parts of cryptozoology. So every time we find a new species of squid, I'm ecstatic.
We're with Pat Spain. His website is his name, linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Pat, where do people get the small little books here?
So Amazon is kind of the one that people are most familiar with, but any of your local bookstores will be able to order them as well.
Excellent. And who publishes?
It's John Hunt Publishing, and the what's it called? I forget the technical term for it, but through John Hunt, it's 6 books. The number 6th books.
Interesting. Of all the books you've written, which is your favorite?
It's tough. It's like picking a favorite kid. I love each of them, and I think each one has. I agree.
You can't do that.
Yeah, it has moments in it. I think the one that's the most personal to me is the 200,000 Snakes. That's the one that, is a lot about how I got into this, why I got into this, and just cancer, my cancer experience throughout, not just filming, but just throughout my life, and what that has kind of meant towards my drive and my goals with this.
Of all these creatures that people think exist, which is the ones that you think you've seen?
So I believe that I heard the Mapinguari when I was in Brazil. I think that that's the one. We heard a call one night when we were in a region. The guides were very, very hesitant to bring us there. It was one of those things that we had to get someone who wasn't a member of the particular tribe of the indigenous people who lived there because they wouldn't go back to this region where it had been heard. So they brought us there. We did hear this call that freaked everyone out, even the folks who were not a member of this group. They kept on saying, we need to leave, and the only thing, I've worked with sloths before, and it did sound like a lower pitched sloth call, so I do believe that we heard that while we were down there. I discovered the first barracuda ever caught in Maine. That was pretty cool. When I was 16 on a marine bio internship, I found a water moccasin or a cottonmouth snake about 200 miles outside of their known range. So there is a lot out there.
It is quite a field, to be sure. Is science getting involved in any of this? They don't seem to be.
Yeah, so it's I really like Darren Naish's take on this. So Darren Naish out of England, he really has this great concept of kind of blending cryptozoology with biology and saying that cryptozoology really isn't distinct from regular biology. If you're talking about looking for undiscovered creatures, that's what biologists do. That's what we do whenever we're in a region where this is possible, or even in closer spots. Like, we're still finding new species in America pretty regularly. So where cryptozoology differs is with, it kind of blends in this cultural anthropology focus as well. And that's what I love about the expeditions that I've done, is we're really looking at these animals through a human lens. So we're looking at them, yes, as the possibility that it's a flesh and blood creature, but more so, why is the story of this creature important, and what does it tell us about the indigenous populations? What does it tell us about the other creatures that are in the area? And that's kind of my favorite take on cryptozoology, is that it's really a blend of biology and anthropology.
Pat, on these investigations, have you felt that there's some species that are disappearing on this, almost going extinct, like certain insects and things like that? Have you felt that?
Absolutely. So when I was in, even down in Costa Rica, we were working with a frog expert down there, and he was kind of bringing us into these regions of the forest where he said, 5 years before they would have found dozens of these frogs, that we were looking for, and now it's almost impossible to find any of them. And you're finding new insects. We can look at lanternflies that kind of plagued the eastern United States this past summer. They weren't there previously, and now we're getting swarms of them. So there are invasive species, and there are species disappearing at a pretty rapid rate. The amphibians are being hit some of the hardest, and certain insect species as well.
Of the two books you said you're writing, what creatures are those?
So those ones have already been written. It's just the publisher is putting them out at a different time frame. So those two, I honestly can't remember which ones are sea serpents.
There's too many, right?
Yeah, 6 of them was wild. That was not my original intention. I wrote this as one book, and I wrote about 800 pages, which is way too much for one book. And the publisher that I was working with said, we're going to have to cut this back. And I said, absolutely, let's start cutting it back. And once they read all 800 pages, they said, rather than cut it back, what if you wrote more? We made this 6 books.
Have you heard of the panther with the red eyes?
It sounds familiar, but I can't place it.
Apparently there's a panther running around somewhere, but it's got red eyes. When you see it at night, it's got these beady red eyes, almost demon-like.
Yeah, so there's a lot of animals that are described as having glowing red eyes and red eyes at night, like the Beast of Bray Road and things like that. And so I did an investigation on the Beast of Bray Road, and I think that most
that was the late Linda Godfrey's story,
yes,
I think.
Yeah, she was amazing. She was such a wonderful woman. I was able to meet with her and spend an afternoon with her, and she was so warm and welcoming, and I was so sad to hear about her passing in 2022. She was really excellent.
We've lost a lot of great, great researchers.
We did. We certainly did, and she was amazing. She was just, as I said, just one of the most kind and welcoming people that I've come across.
What will a crypto hunter not cover?
So I generally have shied away from the more paranormal aspect of things, the things that don't really have a biological explanation.
Well, like ghosts and things like that?
Yeah, which do fascinate me. I'm very interested, but that tends to fall outside of the realm of cryptozoology. That's really more of the paranormal. And I think the most fascinating non-crypto mysterious topic to me are aliens. I think that there's been so much new data that's come out this past year on UFO sightings and things, and the possibility of life being elsewhere in the universe is being very, very high. There is a high likelihood of that. So I think that topic is really interesting, but haven't done formal investigations myself into it.
We're taking calls next hour with Pat Spain as we talk about his world as a cryptozoologist. Of all the things you've done, biology, cryptozoology, you're a biotech expert, TV presenter, what fascinates you the most?
Oh, man, I think that really it's people. People are so interesting. It's constantly surprising what people will come up with, what people will say and do, and the responses. And I'm a father now. I've got 2 kids.
Oh, good for you.
4,
good for you.
And they amaze me and fascinate me every day. And I've been fortunate to have a couple weeks off where I've been able to spend a lot of time and bringing them on adventures and getting to see things that have become commonplace to me over the years but are completely new to them is just unreal and the coolest thing that I've ever done.
And you've got the colon cancer licked?
Yes. Well, knock on wood. I definitely have a really dark sense of humor about all things involving this after what I went through. And my oncologist, it was really great. So when I was cleared, I passed the kind of mark that they're interested, that they're hoping for. And he said, this is my oncologist, said, he goes, look, I can't tell you that you don't have cancer right now. I can't say that I don't have cancer right now. He said, but what I can tell you is right now you are just as likely to die from cancer as everyone else is, which is actually pretty likely. I was like, all right, that works. So I'm back in the normal population.
Chris, we're going to take a quick break and come back and take phone calls with you next. If you have a crypto story or just a question, share that with us. Well, welcome back to the #1 rated late-night talk show. Thanks to you. You make it happen. Pat Spain, our guest. We're going to take calls with Pat, the questions for him, or if you have a crypto story you want to share with us, cryptid rather, jump aboard. And welcome back. George Norrie along with Pat Spain as we talk about his work in the cryptozoology field. Pat, one of the first times that got me interested in this, years ago, I'm a kid, and I'm reading about the abominable snowman in the Himalayas. Remember that one?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, definitely one of my favorites.
A brother of Sasquatch, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, the legends are not too dissimilar. One of the coolest things with the abominable snowman and the Yeti, there's supposedly this footage of David Attenborough where they really thought that they may come across one. So they filmed this, outtake of footage with David Attenborough where he's talking directly to the camera and he says, if you look just over my shoulder, you'll see, the Yeti of legends, the abominable snowman. And, thinking that they would actually get real footage of this creature. So this is apocryphal. I've never seen the footage myself, but I have heard about it. And I would love to see that and love even more to see the creature itself someday.
And, of course, the Yeti has white hair, and it blends in with all the snow up there.
So interesting. Just like a lot of the cryptids that you hear about, some of the bigger ones, there's a couple different versions that you'll hear. And when supposedly, so I haven't done the investigation myself, but I know a few people that have, and they say when you talk to folks in different regions, some describe it as having white fur, but primarily in the winter. So much like some other animals that live in snowy regions kind of change their coat at different times, they describe it as having white fur in the winter and brown fur the rest of the year. And then there's others who say that there are 2 different species one with white fur and one with brown fur. And they talk about the biology of it as, following certain patterns where it goes up to the mountain, where you can reach this salt-rich moss at different times in the year when nutrients are sparse. So it really is a very, very fascinating story, and one I hope to get to investigate one day.
Tell me how the Travel Channel show came about.
So it was years and years in the making. So this was probably 2011 or 12. I think 2012 was the first meeting that I had with Travel Channel about it. And then I happened to be in England, which is where the production company that I work for is based out of. I was giving a speech at the Royal Geographical Society in 2017. Right around 2016, I think, and got a phone call from Travel Channel while I was there. And this had been, as I said, years of talking to them, where they had an interest in, bringing this show that we had developed previously. We had shot 2 pilots for it, and they had decided to do a full-on series of it. So I got the call while I was in England with the production company, just happenstance that worked out. And then it was about another year of development, and then we filmed for 2.5 years before it was released in 2019.
Good for you. Let's go to the phones. Let's go to Bill in Indianapolis to get us started. Hi, Bill.
Hi. Happy New Year, George and Pat.
Thank you, sir. You too.
You as well.
Yes. Speaking of Spain, I just wanted to say a quick Happy New Year to my friend in Madrid, the most beautiful one in Spain, Paula. And I try to get that in before I have a question here. Pat, I wondered if you had any familiarity with Mokele Mbembe and had been on any expeditions down there in the Congo or Cameroon. I had belonged to a crypto club out of British Columbia, and I helped fund an expedition down there to look for the living dinosaur, as they call it. And what I wanted to quickly relate was that they were down going with some local indigenous people, looking along all the riverbanks and trying to get eyewitness reports of people who had seen this thing. What was really interesting is, and I saw the video of this, when they were interviewing some of the tribes people down there and asked them to sketch what they saw, on the neck of this big brontosaurus-type animal, they had sketched feathers. And at that time, I think it was just before 2000, that really hadn't become a public knowledge of feathers on dinosaurs yet. So it kind of looked like it lended credibility to their account of having seen this cryptid.
And I got to tell you, Bill, one of Pat's books is called A Living Dinosaur, where he talks about that dinosaur. Go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's amazing. So were you able to go on the expedition, or you had folks?
No, I was an armchair benefactor for the club there.
Gotcha.
But I've done some field work, mainly with Bigfoot in the Midwest here. But no, I didn't. And there was just so much red tape. For one thing, it was unbelievable just to get permission to go travel down there, aside from all the logistical problems.
Oh, boy. Yeah, I experienced that myself as well. So
what kind of creature is this Mumby?
So Mokele Mbembe is, a supposed type of sauropod, brontosaurus-like dinosaur that has been spotted. The first reports of it were in the 1920s, and it's kind of been this persistent myth and legend since then. And I was able to go down to Cameroon, the Congo, and the Central African Republic. I didn't make it to Lake Tele, as you stated. The red tape to get there. So Lake Tele is one of the regions where a lot of the sightings come out of, but it has a kind of reputation for being incredibly dangerous from a human perspective, not from the wildlife. But there have been some instances, again, stories that were credible enough, where the production company, we did believe them, where folks have been led to Lake Tele and then, ransomed for a massive amount of money in order to be led back out of it. So some real difficulties with getting there. But the other regions that we went to, I did absolutely love it. We did find some really incredible creatures. I do think that the stories of Mokele Mbembe, you mentioned the feathers along the neck. So with the indigenous peoples that we were living with, which were the Baka and the Bayaka, that are two different pygmy tribes, they do describe spines. Some of the groups do describe spines along the neck, and some of them do describe them as feather-like. I believe that feathers were more of the theropod dinosaurs, so these would be more of what we think of with velociraptors and that ilk rather than the sauropods. I don't know that we've identified any sauropods that had these feather-like, kind of accents on them. But in that region, some of them do describe spines, some of them do describe feather-likes, and it really, what I found is that the different groups that you talk to all have a slightly different take on what Mokele Mbembe could be, and they have a number of different names for other dinosaur-like creatures as well. So I don't personally think that there is a sauropod-like dinosaur down there. Just we didn't find the evidence for it, but we did find that the need for this story, and that was, the region that the folks are living in is really, really harsh. It's very difficult to survive in there, and toughness and strength are really highly prized and really regarded there. So if you don't want to go down to the river at night because there are crocodiles in there, then you would be considered weak, and this is not acceptable. You don't say, I'm not going to go down there because there are crocodiles, or I'm not going to take my canoe out because the rapids are extra strong today and I don't know how to swim. But if you don't want to take your canoe out because Mokele Mbembe has been cited, then that's a smart move, and that is well respected. So it's almost this culturally accepted out to not participate in really dangerous things.
Charles Fort, your great-uncle would have been proud of you.
Thank you. Yes, he traveled pretty extensively, and one of my favorite things from Fort's travels are he did not keep a journal because he didn't want to stop himself from embellishing later on.
Did anybody in the family ever explain why he got into the bizarre and unusual?
No, not that I'm aware of. I think that the kind of family history is just that he was always interested in odd things and always wanted to be a writer, and just put those two interests together and started doing what he did. He was really more documenting from news articles and from journals and kind of pulling these little clips from local papers and things and then putting them into his work.
Next up, let's go to Rich in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. Hey, Rich, thanks for calling.
Hey, George, thank you so much for taking my call. This is a great call. Really quick, I'd just like to tell you that in the past I had addiction problems, and coming out of it and changing my life, due to recovery, I used to hear your voice and your bumper music was the only thing I had. So I wanted to thank you for that right up front.
You're welcome. Thank you, Rich.
It was a dark time, and you were pretty much the only voice I had in the darkness. So thank you. But really quickly, in 2015, I went on a hunting trip. We actually took a boat out of Lake Chelan, Washington, for 2.5 hours. We drove the boat. Then we took a battery out of the boat to a car 250 miles away. We drove up this hill. I was in the best shape of my life at the time, and we hiked into this area above Holden, Washington. We were doing some deer hunting. We took the boat. We drove the car. Then we hiked almost another day. So we were extremely remote basically what the U.S. Forestry Service said when I asked questions about this, said it was basically a hotel, helicopter access only area. So the first day we were there, we camped, and we looked up, and there was plenty of deer. Then the next morning when we woke up, it was just an odd feeling for me. I felt really strange. I'm not a hunter. I was just getting started on my outdoorsman stuff. We hiked quite a ways up to this area, and I was with a master tracker guy, a friend of my friend's dad. We go up, we take a few shots. We don't get any deer, but we're out hunting up in this area for almost 12 hours. But it wasn't getting dark, but it was time for us to come back down. So we came back down the exact same way, sir, and these trees had been broken off, and we have been barricaded. They were laying like barricading our ways, and the circumference of these trees was 6 to 8 inches in diameter, and they were literally snapped off at like 4.5 feet and laid in a particular way across our path. And then we got to camp, and everybody was kind of, it was kind of a strange thing, and it was kind of, because it was not like that when we went up to 10 or 11 hours earlier. And then that night, sir, the screaming and the noise and the screaming and howls were so uncomfortable that my friend's dad, he basically just said, "Well, that's not a gopher," and he went to bed. And I had never heard anything like that in my entire life, and it was right outside of Holden, Washington. And then when I got home, this hippie dude, I told him, and he did some research, and he said that there was a website that said the last viable sighting of Bigfoot was right near Holden, Washington, the weekend that I had been up there. So I just had to share it with you guys.
That's amazing. Yeah, and that is exactly in line with a lot of the other Bigfoot experiences and sightings that I've heard, and that I really do find fascinating and would love to do more research in. My friend Cliff Brackman from the Animal Planet show Finding Bigfoot, he's up in that region now, has a museum, not right there, but in that part of the kind of Pacific Northwest. And he's got some amazing stories, similar to that, and he's explored and investigated a lot of them. And I do tend to trust him when he says that there's a lot to it. And that feeling that you described, just that something is happening that you can't quite put your finger on, and that there's something. Like, I put stock in that. I do. I've experienced that as well. That's kind of what I felt with the Mapinguari sighting, or sound hearing, when I was down in Brazil. That you get this this other sense kind of kicks in and tells you that something isn't right. But no, that's fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing that.
West of the Rockies, Scott's with us in Costa Mesa, California. Hey, Scotty, go ahead.
Hey, guys. Well, man, that last story was riveting, and you guys are talking about large creatures. And I have a small creature that I found when I was walking in Pine Top, Arizona, in a mud puddle. And I think, Pat, you probably will be able to name it. I was by myself, and I saw this thing, and I thought I was being punked because it was like a living fossil. It was about an inch, and it was like a horseshoe crab shell.
Oh, yeah.
And then it had a damselfly tail, and I did find them online. And just
triops, right?
Yeah, and
tadpole shrimp.
I was just so baffled because I fortunately I had my camera. I was able to film it, but nobody believed me when I was trying to tell the story. And apparently, they only live for like a week. They become mature within, or maybe 2 weeks. And what is it again? What's the name of it?
It's amazing. Yeah, it's they call them either triops or tadpole shrimp, and that's unreal that you found one in the wild. So I've raised them in the house, kind of like sea monkeys. Like they're.
I used to raise tadpoles in the house too.
Yeah, little different than the tadpole. These are
George. These are crazy, and I think you find them as like petrified in fossils.
Yeah, they look like trilobites. They're just these really bizarre little things that and they are what's it called? They're carnivorous. They're cannibalistic. So if you have like 5 of them, eventually you'll just have one really big one.
Yeah.
And they just look so strange and just so unusual. And to find one in the wild, I could see where having no point of reference, that would be really, really cool. And Arizona is just about the only place where you could do that. So that's amazing that you found one.
And if anybody out there in George Norrie land or whatever, look them up because they are very cool.
You can order them. You can get them as pets, like sea monkeys. But
I'm going to do that.
Cooler than sea monkeys.
Hey, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Text and tweets, Tom. What do you have for Pat?
Hey, this is from Carl in West Virginia. Kind of fun. He says, please ask the guest if he has a favorite Hollywood monster, such as Godzilla, the Gargantuas, Monster Zero, etc., and if so, why?
Do you, Pat?
Yeah, so I loved Cloverfield. I thought that was so cool. I liked that, early shaky cam kind of thing, and being the monster that you don't quite exactly see, but kind of Godzilla-like. I thought that was a really, really cool take on that. I loved all the Godzilla films growing up, for sure.
How about Frankenstein?
Oh yeah, definitely. I loved that book as well. I think I read the book when I was in 5th grade, which was probably too early to have read that.
But he would not be considered a cryptid, would he?
No, unfortunately.
Just an aberration.
More into that paranormal.
Something strange created by science, huh?
Yeah.
That is something. Pat, we're coming up to a break. Tell us about your books. Where can people get them, and your website?
So the book series is called On the Hunt. There are 6 of them, and you can find them on Amazon or any of your local bookstores.
And the website?
The website is patspain.com.
Do you take emails through the website?
Yes. Yep. There's a submission on there for folks to contact me.
And you'll get back to them?
I try. My life is very, very busy, so I do eventually get back, but it takes me a little while.
All right, we're going to come back in just a moment with Pat Spain and take final phone calls. So those of you on hold, just keep your spot as we talk about cryptids. Share your story with us or just a question or two. Back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. George Norrie with us on our next Coast to Coast program. Pharmacist Ben Fuchs joins us from criticalhealthnews.com. Looking forward to that. And then you're all invited to my 20th anniversary celebration. We'll have 4 special guests for you who want to jump in and say hi. But we're going to keep the phone lines open for the last 2 hours so you can jump aboard as well. That's our next Coast to Coast program. Can you believe 20 years, Tom?
That's unbelievable.
That's something like. And welcome back to Coast, our final segment with Pat Spain as we talk about cryptos. Pat, let me tell you a story I had during Open Line several years ago. Tell me if you believe it or not. It was a great call. Sure. Guy calls me and says he was fishing along the bank of a small river. And he said he caught 2 fish, looked up, and was 10 feet away from a Bigfoot staring at him. He said he couldn't believe it. He was scared to death, but he didn't know what to do. So he offered the 2 fish to the Bigfoot. He just held them out. And Bigfoot walked up to him, took the 2 fish, looked at him, looked at the fish, gave him one back, and ran away. Do you believe that?
It's pretty wild. I mean, I wouldn't want to tell anyone that they're lying to me, so I believe it without evidence to the contrary. It's pretty bizarre.
Would a Bigfoot do that?
I mean, no one knows because we have no documented evidence of what that animal is or is not. I mean, a grizzly bear I don't think would give you one back. So
no, I don't think so either.
A grizzly bear might take a little bit more than the fish.
He may take your arm with him.
Right.
But there's no doubt people are seeing some kind of creature. Would you agree?
I would agree with that. Absolutely. Yes, people are seeing something and they are seeing evidence of something, but we just don't have the definitive proof yet. And I mean, there are folks like Dr. Jeff Meldrum who are documenting, foot patterns and, documenting all the tracks and everything and saying from an anthropological perspective, this is what it could be. This is what could have evolved into a Sasquatch. But we just don't have the hard evidence yet to say, that there is truly an animal there.
And Melba Ketchum was trying to get DNA samples?
Yeah, absolutely.
Something's out there.
And I know that there's been a lot of work with trying to get different DNA samples, and now with new eDNA technology, I think it's only a matter of time before we pretty quickly, I think we'll have some really good new answers to some of those mysteries.
Back to the phones. First-time caller Si's with us in Mississippi. Hi, Si. Thanks for calling.
Gentlemen, how are you this evening?
Great.
Or morning, rather.
Great. Hope you are, too.
Absolutely. I very much appreciate you taking my call. I had a story I wanted to share, and it kind of veers into a topic I was wondering if Pat had ever looked into or studied. I hunt deer here in Mississippi, where I'm from, but I was not taught how to deer hunt the normal father-son type way because my dad didn't hunt. I got into it about 10 years ago from people that were kind of my own age, and they would take me out. And the way they hunted, is what the majority of hunters here in Mississippi do, which is basically you get in a very tall stand and you have some sort of a planted attracting or bait for the deer to come to, and you use a high-powered rifle scope. And I always thought, well, something just didn't feel right. And I kept learning more about it, and I'm certainly not judging people that hunt like that. But finally, I thought, I'm going to try something different. So I only hunt with either a bow or a Cherokee tomahawk that I actually carved myself. And I go out and I don't sit in a tree. I actually stalk and walk in the woods. And I was at a point in my life where I was trying to figure out sort of like a release. And the first time I went out in the woods just by myself walking and actually stalking a deer, something happened. It was like a connection almost. And I know a lot of my friends think I'm nuts for even hunting like this, but since I've started hunting like this years ago, it's almost like when you're out there with just a very primitive weapon rather than some sort of a high-powered rifle, there's a connection there. And I can only describe it as it's almost like the deer, the large bucks that we hunt, it's almost like they rise to the challenge of somebody actually getting more to their level. And I'm wondering if Pat has ever studied or looked into the spiritual connection that hunters feel with what they're actually. Now, I'm not talking about, again, the situation where you're hunting with the extremely large advantage, but more so like when you're bringing yourself down to the animal's level, because I will never hunt with a rifle again because the connection you feel with that particular deer that you're stalking, and when you finally get that deer, and of course we don't trophy hunt. We always, actually use the meat for deer, but it's just you can't describe how different it is. And I was just kind of wondering if he's ever looked at that before.
That's amazing. Yeah, so I don't hunt myself, but I do know a few hunters, and the folks that I know who hunt the way that you've described have the same kind of experience. So a friend of mine way up in northern Maine, that's how he hunts as well. A homemade bow and arrow, and that's it. He gets, as you said, it's not trophy hunting. He gets less deer than the folks that go out with the high-powered rifles, but he feels that same sense of connection. And I have experienced that as well when I was in West Africa. I went on a hunt with the Baka people, and we were using, elephant spears and blow darts and things to go out on this hunt. And you definitely get that sense of connection with the forest where you feel more a part of nature than if you were out there in all this tactical gear with, as you said, kind of modern weapons and things. And I think that there is something to that. It's that, human nature of kind of seeking out and wanting that connection to the wider, wild world, and being able to find that in that, very primal activity of, finding food, finding a food source and doing it in a natural way. So, yeah, no, I really respect that. And I think that's incredible that you were able to find that and that you still continue to do that.
Great story. Thank you, Cy. Next up, let's go to Walter in Pennsylvania. Hello, Walt.
George, congratulations on 20 years. I only regret that I've only been with you, I guess, for the last 6. I used to write a newspaper column. That was my outlet, George.
Well, thank you, Walt.
I mean, I feel like a fish out of water, George, when I talk to you. I'm a writer, George. I'm not a talker, so I hope you bear with me.
Well, we always do, even though you're our skeptic.
Yeah. George, I wonder, Pat, it's easy. One of the revolutionary ideas in biology today is that birds are dinosaurs. Now, it's skeleton-wise, and, it's easy to correlate the theropod dinosaurs with especially large birds like ostriches and emus, cranes, etc. But, when he mentioned sauropods, it set me to thinking is that, maybe things like rhinos and hippos and even elephants, they have sauropod-like feet. And they may be the ancestors of the sauropod dinosaurs.
Yeah, so I mean, I'd have to turn to folks who know significantly more about dinosaur biology than I do, like Darren Naish and some of the others. But I believe that the foot structures, while they look similar on the outside, they're very dissimilar from a truly like the bone perspective. It's kind of like bats and birds. Their wings may look similar from the external view, but they are really, really different in how they are formed. So I think that the elephant and rhino feet are very different than how a sauropod's foot structure truly is. But again, I'd really have to defer to the experts on that one.
Tom has a final text or tweet for you, Pat. What do you have, Thomas?
Well, Pat, Katrina in Indiana asks, what about temper patterns of creatures like the Bigfoot? What makes them act docile? What sets them off? And if captured, do you think they can be trained?
Training a Bigfoot. So, again, we just need more evidence to be able to really say what is out there. The problem is that the vast majority of our evidence are eyewitness accounts, which are notoriously unreliable, and we get very different perspectives from each person who's putting in a report. So some people describe a Bigfoot as really aggressive and, a meat eater and a hunter. Others describe it as very docile and something like, the story that you were sharing earlier, George, with, sharing a fish with a fisherman. So without the real hard scientific evidence of having, detailed observations that are published in a journal or having, ideally a specimen that we can study ourselves, it's really hard to say what's out there. What I would say is I would not want anyone to go out and try to hunt, as in actually physically kill, a Bigfoot just for fear of getting the wrong species or of killing an endangered species.
Or a guy in a costume.
Or a guy in a costume, exactly. So I think observation is the key here, and then we can get more evidence and get, potentially be able to answer that question in the future.
Do you get many stories of little Bigfoot, the children?
So, yeah, interestingly, I have heard a few, and there was a footage a few years back where there was supposedly one that was climbing a tree, and that's what some of the researchers say is that the younger species climb, whereas the adults are more on the ground, and that's more like an orangutan, where these big, the big old males can't even climb trees anymore because they've gotten too large. And some people have equated, Sasquatch with that. But again, without the real evidence, it's hard to say. I'm still on the fence in regards to that. I do know some people who are researchers and who have done the investigation themselves and found some really compelling evidence, but I haven't seen it yet myself. I'm still open-minded and looking for it.
East of the Rockies, Michael in Connecticut. Hey, Michael, go ahead.
Hey, how you doing, George? Happy 20th anniversary to you and your whole team. You guys are really fascinating.
Thank you, Michael.
Light to a lot of things. So I was just fishing with a buddy of mine in a reservoir at night, and we heard a loud noise coming down through the woods behind us, which, of course, is going to frighten you. Yep. But like Pat said, it was a different kind of frightening for me. I've seen plenty of bear and stuff like that, and I felt very frightened by this thing, you understand? And so the moonlight was shining, and somehow, we started walking away, kind of looking at it that way, and I saw it, which looked like a 10-foot tall animal standing on its hind legs. I know this sounds crazy, but and it looked more like the shape of a werewolf to me or something, not like thin, not like a bear is what I'm saying. And then it had big, huge yellow eyes, and we ran for it. We got out of there, George. So we were scared. I was very frightened, and it was like you described, Pat. That it was more than a bear. I can tell you that. So that's how I felt, anyhow. So.
Yeah, I would have run as well, for sure. I would have hopefully tried to snap a picture first, and then, but probably not. I admittedly probably would have run.
Feet don't fail me now, right?
Yeah, and that is, I mean, that's what so many people describe is just, you see something that feels so other, it feels so different, something that you're not expecting to see, even people who have a lot of experience in the woods, and you just kind of don't know how to process it, don't know what to do, and, the good move is to get out of there.
With so many people with cell phone cameras, you would think we'd get more pictures.
So, yeah, an experiment that they actually had me try to do in Sumatra was the crew put me up in a tree, about 12 feet up in this tree, and then left me there. And I had a really good, high-powered camera that was ready to go, sitting on my lap, ready to take a picture of anything that I saw. And the whole theory was, okay, so you've got this camera, you're ready, you are prepared for it. You're better than most people who are walking through the woods with this. Now try to get a picture of any animal, anything. And I got a couple blurry photos of birds.
How's Jeremy?
I heard a troop of gibbons all around me, and I could identify them as gibbons. I heard things going through the underbrush. I caught glimpses of other animals here and there, but just the difficulty in getting a good, clear shot of something is not as easy as I think a lot of people assume it would be.
The only Gibbons I know is Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top, Pam. Yeah. Pat.
Gibbons are kind of mid-sized primate that you'll find in Southeast Asia, and they're really, really cool animals. Although one of them did poop all over our cameraman's head at one point, which
really
was hysterical for me, but not so great for him.
It must have been a rough time for him, huh?
He wasn't too happy about it.
Pat, we've got a minute left. I want you to tell people about your books, your website, how they can get a hold of you, and just take the platform.
Thank you so much. So my website is patspain.com, and you can get in touch with me there. You can also find some links to the books, which are from, you can find them on Amazon or any of your local bookstores. The name of the series is On the Hunt, and there are 6 of them that cover all different cryptids and different wildlife adventures. And the books really are kind of darkly funny travel stories.
All right, Pat, thank you again for being on the program. Really appreciate it. And you did a marvelous job. Let us know when some of the other books come out. You've got 2 in the works. We'd love to get you back. Pat Spain is his name. His website, patspain.com. Simple to remember, linked up at coasttocoastam.com. On our next Coast to Coast program, pharmacist Ben Fuchs joins us from criticalhealthnews.com. And then to the last 2 hours of the show, we're going to celebrate the 20-year anniversary of our staff and me giving you Coast to Coast. For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonewood, Sean Ladesseur, Stephanie Smith, Chris Burrows, Tim Banal, George Knapp, and Ian Punnett, I'm George Norrie, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.